From a network of highly secure, top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider. I am your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by Tom Orsborn, Jeff McDonald, and Nick Talbot. Since we spoke to you last, the good news is your local Cagers have won 4 of their last 6 games. The bad news is the local Cagers have won 4 of their last 6 games.
I see what you did there.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing? How do you handle this news? Let's start with Jeff.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing? To go Mac Brown on you? Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Why is it good? Why is it bad? For the glass half full, glass half empty. Speak to all of the listeners. And this week, they're only listeners. We haven't gotten our act together back into the highly secure, top secret headquarters. So this is just for your ears this week. But talk to the people.
Let's be honest with the listeners who aren't viewers. It's because no one wanted to look at you.
That's correct.
They asked us to please stop putting this on video, so people they can mute you, but they can't just what's the opposite of mute, or what's the visual equation? They can't visually mute you. So
blindfold themselves.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should pass out blindfolds, and that
maybe
would
so.
Anyway, why is it good? Because winning is good, and winning is good for the soul. It's good for morale. It's good for these young kids to learn how to win a game here or there. And no one wants to lose 11 in a row. That was miserable. So it's fun to have stretches where you win 4 of 6, and they're not the Orlando freaking Magic winning like 6 in a row or anything like that. I mean, let's not get out of hand. But winning is good, and it's good for these guys to learn how to win and to have some success and to see some sort of, proof that the way they're playing and the way they're being taught to play can bear fruit. It's bad because it's pushed the Spurs. Now they are in sole possession of, I think it's 28th place, 27th place in the NBA, which you want to be 28, 29, or 30, preferably closer to 30. So yeah, it is. Every win sort of lessens their lottery odds to get one of the big guns at the top of this draft. I mean, there are some really bad teams out there. It's going to be hard to out-tank Houston is one thing I'm seeing, and there's some teams in the East that are going to be hard to out-tank. So every time you win a game, it affects that part of the equation. So if you're a Spurs fan, it's hard to be totally happy or totally upset. It's a weird season that way.
Anything to add, Tom Orsborn?
Yeah, I mean, from the positive viewpoint during this 6-game stretch, we've seen Devin Vassell, assert himself. There was that game I covered in Miami where he hit 2 big shots in the last 2 minutes to basically win that game. He played really well against Houston Monday night on the 19th with Keldon Johnson out. He shot a high volume and did really well in that game. Then the rookies, Malachi Branham in Mexico City, that was the start of a really good 2 games for him. He played well off the bench there after playing a G League game the night before. That was pretty impressive. And then he carried it over and had another good game in Houston. So, from individual standpoints, you've got things to look at and to be, if you're looking for positives, that'll bode well for the future. Once these guys get, as Greg Popovich says, a superstar, once they get a superstar in place, they've got a good supporting cast. If you continue to see that development from Devin, Branham, Sohan, Keldon, those guys that'll be part of the supporting cast.
But the more they win, the harder it's going to be to get that superstar. It's a catch-22. It's a conundrum.
Catch-22, absolutely.
Since we've spoken to the listeners last, there has been the return of Jeremy Sohan, right? Anybody want to fill us in on what we've seen from him coming back from his injury?
We saw some one-handed free throws in Houston. That was interesting.
What's the story there?
He's shooting free throws one-handed.
That's the kind of in-depth analysis you can get on expressnews.com and the Express News newsletter.
Jeff's been around Pop too long. That's a great Pop answer.
It is.
When he wants to be that way. Yeah,
I don't know if I take that as a compliment or not.
It's a compliment.
All right. Shoot around in Houston. The Houston game was the first time young Mr. Sohan has unveiled this unorthodox free throw shooting form. And it really, the first time I witnessed it was earlier in the morning at shoot around, kind of standing around waiting to speak to a couple of the fellas. And, at the end of shoot around, there's just basically people doing just that, shooting around. At the very end at the opposite end of the Toyota Center was Jeremy Sohan and a coach called Greg Popovich, kind of working on this. And it caught my eye because you almost never see Pop that hands-on working with a guy's shooting form before. And Pop took the ball and put it in his own hand and took some shots and showed what he wanted and what he wanted Sohan to do and to mimic. And then I watched Jeremy Sohan sit there and sink about 6 in a row that way without the ball even touching the rim. Like, it was the most beautiful shot you've ever seen in your life.
One-handed or two-handed?
One-handed.
Uh-huh.
Holding the ball one-handed, just like you saw in the game the other night. Now, in the game, he was 1 for 4. I think it's going to take a while to get used to. I also don't think this is going to be his form for life. I'm still kind of putting some pieces together on this. I'd like to talk to Jeremy himself about this. But I think what they're doing, and this is kind of a thing Chip England used to do when he was here, although you never saw it like publicly on the free throw line like you saw the other night, is when you got a guy that are trying to remake their shooting form, you kind of break it down to the very basic element. And it's just that motion. Get the offhand out of there, get the get one hand under the ball, get the right amount of arc, the right touch. I remember years ago watching Chip do this with DeJounte Murray from about 6 feet. Like, just, we're going to sit here for 20 minutes and just work on that motion with one hand. And that's kind of what we saw Pop doing with Sohan the other night. And, it's part of a larger project with Jeremy. I mean, he's got so many really quality skills and pieces that you can see right now that he can do well right now, that he can help you with right now. But like we've said on this podcast before, if he just would ever get some sort of outside jump shot, he's going to be kind of a problem for the rest of the league. And so this season is a lot about figuring out how to give this guy a jump shot because his form isn't great. We've seen the three-pointer, especially earlier this season, like it's spinning sideways. So they're really working with breaking down his shot to the foundation and rebuilding it. And this is part of that project.
That's some really helpful, insightful information from Jeff McDonald. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I blacked out there for a second while I was talking.
The viewers are going to assume that this is some kind of imposter that's going on here. There wasn't any juvenile puns or jokey jokes in the middle of all of that analysis. We're setting a new standard for ourselves.
If it would make you feel better, I could make some armpit noises or something.
That might put the listeners at ease to think that you haven't been abducted. But that was very insightful. Learned a lot about free throw shooting and Spurs way and all that type of stuff.
Well, I aim to please.
Very, very impressive, sir.
I was trying to think of last night. Jeff and I were exchanging texts on this topic. I was trying to think of the last guy who shot one-handed like that, and I finally Googled it this morning, Desmond Mason, but he always took his offhand, his guide hand off right before shooting. But this is so unique. It's like he's a one-armed man. Like the one-armed man. Mike and I used to play basketball with at Incarnate Word University. I don't know if you remember that, Mike. The one-armed man.
That was a long time ago.
You guys played basketball with the Fugitive?
Well, that's where I thought Tom was going, was with Richard Kimball, the man who attacked Richard Kimball. But yeah.
But anyway, that's interesting. That so Jeff, in all likelihood, at some point, he's gonna have that guide hand up there.
I think. Well, I think the Spurs are going to be. You're going to know the Spurs are serious when he starts shooting them granny style.
That would be Rick Barry.
Yes.
I believe who popularized that move.
Right. Maybe Rick Barry's son could teach him.
Yeah.
By that, I mean John Barry.
Right. Well, which other son of Rick Barry would we be referring to?
I don't know any other ones.
Yeah. You wrote something, articles on expressnews.com in the hard paper edition of the San Antonio Express News and in the Express News newsletter about Spurs rookies, correct? Is there something that you can tell the listeners about, any trenchant analysis to continue the trend that you've set forth in this podcast so far? Some more analysis about Spurs rookies in addition to Jeremy Sohan.
Well, we kind of knew coming into this year this was going to be a different sort of year for the Spurs incoming rookie class. Like for years and years, and this is kind of to the chagrin of a certain segment of the fan base. Like when you're a Spurs rookie coming in, you realize you just come in knowing you're going to spend the year in Austin, basically. And if you see any time with the NBA club, it might just be some for a stretch here or there, some garbage time minutes, but you're not really going to have a role on the team. But we knew coming into this year, this is a different kind. You know, those Spurs teams were competing for playoffs and championships, and they don't have time to bring rookies along, you know, to get rookies up to speed while they're in pursuit of that stuff. But a season like this, where the idea of it is development, we knew that the rookies that they drafted were going to have a chance to play and play a lot. And it's starting to come together for some of those guys. I mean, Sohan has started for most of the year. He's coming off the bench now. He started for most of the year, and you're starting to see him kind of come into his own and be a little more aggressive, looking for his own shot, figuring out what he can and can't do, kind of test driving some things there. But the guy that's come along that Tom mentioned earlier, a little more recently, it was Malachi Branham, the 20th pick out of Ohio State, and he's gotten some run due to some injuries off the bench. You know, they've had some members of the guard rotation out, so Malachi has been playing a lot. And you know, at the beginning of the year, he really looked like he was a little overmatched. It looked like, you know, he came in billed as this great shooter. He was having trouble just connecting on much of anything beyond the 3-point arc. He looked pretty good inside the arc when he had those chances. The last couple games, he seems to have put some stuff together. He's got like 26 points in 2 games combined. He's 10 of 13 from the field. He's made, I think, 5 3-pointers in those games in sort of limited minutes, and starting to show a little bit of what he can do. And I think like with any rookie, and it's gonna be ups and downs. You're gonna have some slippage. You're gonna have some good stretches or bad stretches. But he's in the middle of a good stretch right now. And I think another piece of that puzzle is Blake Wesley, who looked like he was going to push for a rotation piece until he was injured in his second NBA game, tearing an MCL. But he's on the way back. He's played a couple G League games. They're going to kind of, I assume, eventually bring him back to the big club, and he'll work his way back in the mix as well. And so in a season like this, where you kind of wonder what to look for on the floor, if you're a fan, what am I looking at? You're not really judging the season on wins or losses. You can't let your mood kind of ride with the wins and losses. What you look for is guys like Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham, and Blake Wesley. And do we see strides there? Do we see what they can be? Do we see the seeds being planted of what they can be in 3-4 years? And so that's kind of what we've seen lately from at least 2 of those guys who haven't been injured.
The segue here, with the assistance of friend of the podcast, Airless Jordan, is the bit of trivia that Malachi Branham was the first player in the history of the NBA and G League to play back-to-back games in a foreign country. He played for your Austin Spurs one night in Mexico City, the next night for the San Antonio Spurs, and the representative of the San Antonio Express News, expressnews.com, Spurs Insider podcast, who was there to see it all, chronicle it as only he can, was our friend Tom Orsborn. And this is my way of getting to the segment of the podcast where Tom tells us about his Mexico City adventure. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, it was a great trip. Not only for me, but the Spurs took just about their entire office staff down there, and by all accounts, everyone had a great time. The players, it was interesting to see Keldon Johnson kind of go from I'm just going to stay in my hotel room and play. Going here and there in the city to see the sights, and there are quite a few. And then he was out there at the G League game on Friday night, the Capitanes. That was a great atmosphere, and Keldon was part of it. Just always jumping off the bench and high-fiving guys and cheering and shouting instructions during the game. And then, about midway through the fourth quarter, his teammates, Sohan, Devin, Bassey, a couple other guys, they left. They took a bus or shuttle back early to the hotel. Keldon stays there, and till the very end. Austin Spurs lose, and he's out there giving hugs to guys from both teams and going in the locker room. Just the guy's incredible. His enthusiasm is really off the charts, and so that was kind of cool. And he had a great time in Mexico City, and I think they all did. Devin said that he'd love to see him play 2 games a year down there. So it was a really nice trip. Really good time. For me personally, I stayed till Sunday night, and I was able to get out and see quite a bit. But it was kind of cool with the World Cup going on, seeing all the cars parked along the streets with their radios blaring, listening to the game. And, you'd hear shouts here and there when Argentina did something well. And so it was a cool experience.
Is it really a trip to Mexico City, though, if the arena doesn't burn down?
Yeah. Well, we had a little lighting issue, 15-minute delay.
That's child's play. That's child's play. That doesn't even count.
The lights wouldn't come back on. And that came, about 2 hours after Commissioner Adam Silver had talked glowingly about Mexico City's chances if there ever is a next round of expansion to get a team. But, in all truth, the glitches at the arena that the league has experienced through the years, 2 of them having to do with Spurs games, really have no bearing. I think Mexico City is well positioned. There's a lot of money, a lot of sponsorships there, and I think that's the key. And the fans are enthusiastic.
I know in your previous trip to Mexico City to cover an NBA game, there was quite a lot of drama when it came to you filing your story post game. How did this last trip compare to that setup?
One of our colleagues in the office was able to get me a hotspot, a Verizon hotspot from unbeknownst to them, I believe. But that saved me. I was able to file. A large part of your time in Mexico City is spent in a car or a bus because of the traffic. And having that hotspot allowed me to file in situations where I normally would have had to wait quite a bit before I found Wi-Fi. But it made everything so much easier.
No getting kicked out of arenas or
no,
being at a loss for where to find things. Jeff was there for the fire, right?
Yeah, I filed that from the back of a van with a hotspot.
Ah, there you go.
That was back when we all had them, though.
Yeah, those were great times when we all had them. Hint.
People don't want to hear about our hotspot issues.
Yeah,
but
Iceman had a great time. He was at a charity event they did at the America School, which is a school that has quite a few, as aptly named, a lot of Americans. But the clinic was open to people outside of the school, so there were a lot of kids with disabilities that were part of that camp, and the Spurs showed up in force to help out. And the Iceman had an opening statement that was really nice, and everyone kind of gravitates toward him. He's such an engaging figure, and the Iceman went from being so slender to now kind of a Santa Claus type, and he's just
happens to a lot of people.
The kids gravitated toward him, and he had a great time, and It was really nice to see. He loves that ambassador role, and whenever they have a chance to use him, he really lights up for it.
Well, I meant to ask you about another Spurs representative who George the Iceman Gervin has a larger than life personality. Everybody knows. Yes. Wonderful ambassador. Yes. I got a text message, an SMS text message from Jeff McDonald last week that just about broke my heart when he reported that there was another just insanely charismatic, well-known Spurs representative who was going to make a public appearance in Mexico City, and I was going to be unable to see him. Jeff was going to be unable to see him, and we are talking, of course, about behind the bench assistant Willis. Yeah. Was that everything you dreamed it would be? Friend of everyone.
Friend of everyone. Willis Hall.
Willis Hall. Did he take Mexico City by storm? Did he stay there to become mayor? Just one of the nicest people in the world, going to be a future head coach someday, just like Will Hardy became, just like Becky Hammond will be, James Borrego, go down the list, Quinn Snyder. You're going to be hearing about Willis Hall at some point. But what was the Willis Hall experience in Mexico City?
Yeah, Willis was a representative at a coaching clinic, and, he was his usual enthusiastic and engaging self there. And, he was, I think I saw him at the G League game as well, along with R.C. Buford and some other folks. Yeah, he was all over the place, doing a great job. And, Willis is wonderful. He's always been a friend of, a friend to us, always been a friendly face. And he was certainly that way.
Jeff can speak to this. And we're sort of just kind of joking because it's fun to see those type of guys. Again, I'll let Jeff talk about it more in depth. But when you're a reporter in the old days, especially before COVID, and your job is to stand in locker rooms and just kind of stand there like an idiot because you're supposed to document when the locker room is open, make sure nothing happens. A lot of times the other goofball in there is the video coordinator. And back when Jeff was starting out, that was who? James Borrego? Was he your first?
JB was my first video coordinator. Yep.
I mean, all these guys come through here. Mike Budenholzer was a video coordinator a long time ago. Joe Prunty became a head coach for a while. You see these guys kind of work their way up. And like Willis is panicked one day after a game, I think when Kawhi was still here, because he had to, his big job that night, just frantic, was he was in charge of getting the wine for the night. And you see these guys a lot of times in their early 20s, mid 20s, whatever, just working their way up, looking at video, kind of just sitting there, making small talk, whatever. But these guys become NBA superstar coaches. And it's cool to see. But go ahead and tell people your video coordinator stories.
Well, I don't know if I have any stories, but just the inside baseball is kind of what you mentioned. Like, it's not like you're just standing around the locker room, but yeah, you want to go, you have a question to ask Danny Green, but you have to go in there and wait until Danny Green is done with whatever, warming up or comes out of the train. Like, so you just have to go stand by his locker. And it just does feel weird just to be standing there staring into space. And so what you start to learn is, well, here's this same guy sitting next to me in every locker room from Orlando to Milwaukee to Salt Lake City. And so it just becomes a familiar face, and you want to talk to somebody so you don't look like you're just standing around like an idiot. So you just start making small talk with the guy next to you, who I found out very early on was the video coordinator. That was James Borrego. And you just talk about anything just to kind of keep yourself occupied. You can learn a lot from those guys. Some of them are funny. I think what's our, I guess you told the Willis story about the wine. You have any other Willis stories? Why we like him as a mascot type person?
Just and I'm not belittling him as a mascot person, but he's there to kind of tolerate our ridiculousness, and this podcast is but a small glimpse into our ridiculousness. And so just to have a guy who's kind of nodding and winking, and he's not divulging state secrets or anything. He's just there kind of looking amused by what's going on. And sometimes we're the ones being amused at like Davis Bertans and Quincy Pondexter debating how long they could stay in the ring with Mike Tyson. That's the type of stuff that goes on in the locker rooms.
What we did learn is if the basketball thing doesn't work out for Willis, he could be like the manager of a food service operation. We found that out one night.
Like sometimes when the media dining hall is short on food, he will get on the case and go get it refilled. Good guy. Good, cool to see people like that, whether it's George Gervin, Willis Hall. Tom said that the whole staff came down to Mexico City. Everybody got kind of a trip out of it, was able to interact with the locals, that type of stuff. And in a season like this one, that's kind of what you're looking for.
But
just moments.
He's supposed to be out there warming up Devin Vassell, and he's chasing down like grilled chicken for you. In the city of San Antonio, who has cemented a larger legacy among the public, who is it more important to please, Devin Vassell or Mike Finger, host of Spurs Insider podcast? Like Willis understood where his bread is baked. Who can help him more in the long run, Mike Finger or Devin Vassell? How many columns has Devin Vassell ever written anyway?
Like less than 300, not that. Yeah. And, so of course, if I needed some grilled chicken, Devin Vassell needed his jump shot worked on. Willis chose correctly. Anything else we need to cover? This is our producer, Luis, mentions this is probably going to be our last podcast of 2022. He suggested a year in review. I sort of don't think that I want to put the listeners through that because it was not a great year for the local Cagers. But any thoughts? We haven't heard from Nick Talbot yet today. Any thoughts on our year at the Express News local Cagers beat? Just your reflections on what 2022 meant.
On what 2022 meant? Well, it meant only rebuilding for the Spurs. I think Jeff kind of covered things so well. He wasn't so full of nonsense today that we didn't really have to stop. I didn't have to step in and say anything. So
that's true.
I apologize.
When we didn't get on the topic of telepathic octopuses like we did on the Pick'em show, you want nonsense. That was some nonsense. So I appreciate all you guys. I think that's the main thing. I appreciate all the work you guys do. So, look, when I reflected back on the year, it's not easy covering the Spurs when they aren't the top team anymore. We covered them for years when they were, going June deep, and now we're covering them with a different thing. It's a completely different side of a thing. So I appreciate y'all for 2022. And for Spurs fans, just keep your heads up. There will be better days ahead as long as the draft goes well.
Tom, your thoughts as we close down 2022?
He was just stealing your bit of ending on optimism.
Yeah, I'm going to let y'all do that this week. Tom, go ahead.
You picked the wrong guy.
You're the optimist. It's the holidays.
Well, like Nick said, it's incredible what our staff does with so few. We do so much with so few, and David Hinojosa and Greg Luca, Nick Moyle. It's incredible the depth of coverage this year with so much going on. UTSA being great, UIW being great, Longhorns, being what they are. So there was a lot going on this year, and it's impressive. Being the guy that was on the staff when we had almost 40 staffers, and being that we have 8 now, it's really incredible to see the level of coverage staying pretty high.
So this has turned into kind of some self-congratulations, which I'm not sure people love. But now I'm going to move to Jeff to kind of bring us down, which is his job.
Let's talk about all the ways that we sucked this year.
Do you have any non-vulgar, just totally bummer 2022 thoughts?
I really don't.
You don't?
Let's try to do better next year, everybody.
We will try to do better next year. We've got some. Again, I'm being pressed to make some promises that I don't want to make quite yet about the Spurs Insider podcast in 2023 because there's no guarantees yet, but there could be good things. There could be exciting things coming up.
I mean, we could be living on sponge cake.
We could be living on sponge cake. Is that a euphemism for something? I'm not sure what that means.
I'm just hungry.
Okay. We could be living on sponge cake. Is living on sponge cake a good thing? Is it a bad thing for the rest of this year, 2022? I'm just going to think that it's a good thing because who wouldn't want to live on sponge cake? That sounds good to me. Covering the local Cagers for another several months into the 2022-23 season sounds good to me. Could be worse. And that's what I'm going to leave you with for this year until 2023. Could be worse. Take care of each other. Keep it real. We'll see you.